Welcome. Thank you for coming along. I'm Stacy Johnson, and we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about reverse mentoring. What I intend to do is tell you a little bit about the ReMEDI project, and then hopefully leave some time at the end for some discussion, for you to think about how it might work where you are, okay? Somebody needs to help me keep an eye on time. My friend from Hernan might have to help me that. If you could just remind me when we get to 12:15, okay? Just to make sure that we had a chance to have some discussion and so on, okay? We're going to have some discussion at the end, and a specific time for questions, but actually do stick your hand up as I go along if you have any questions, okay? So, unlike the message that you get normally, where we say to NHS professionals, please don't use acronyms. I'm going to use many acronyms. I'm going through an acronyms phase. So I want to tell you about the ReMEDI, Reverse Mentoring Quality Rating Inclusion, ReMEDI with an I project, which is a series of pieces of work that I'm doing across health and social care, and actually now across higher education, looking at the potential for reverse mentoring to promote inclusion in different groups, okay? And don't worry, there's more acronyms coming, okay? And I'm Stacy Johnson, I'm from the University of Nottingham, but I'm a nurse by background, so the NHS is in my blood, and actually even though I don't directly nurse patients anymore, I regularly visit NHS hospitals because, of course, I'm at the University of Nottingham. We visit students on the wards because I'm a nurse. And of course, I'm increasingly doing more work around reverse mentoring with individual provider trusts. And as you'll see later, some arm's length bodies now coming on board. I don't know if anybody's working, and I'm sure many of you more and more are working at that crossover between health and social care. Some of you might be having links with higher education, and hopefully be coming across the ReMEDI project in some of those places, okay? So this is what one of the mentees, a senior board member of one of the provider trusts that's involved in the project, said about the ReMEDI project. And of course, I'm a researcher, so even though I set out to try this out and then see what happened, I had an a priori hunch about that it might be effective. But it's exciting to begin to see some feedback coming through about what actual practitioners, people out on the coalface, are saying about the ReMEDI project. This is a generic board member. I have to say, so one of the things that reverse mentoring is meant to do is facilitate different conversations about not just culture and inclusion, but racism, sexism, and so on, disadvantage, marginalization, okay? It's also meant to promote cultural humility. It's meant to make people in the reverse mentoring relationship, and usually, mainly on the mentee side, but actually generally we find there's mutual benefit. It's meant to promote cultural humility. The notion that you have to be infinitely teachable, and there's no point at which you will know it all about inclusion and cultural competence, okay? So I'll admit to my first, it made me, even as a worker, remind myself about cultural humility. So I'm sure you are not surprised that as a black female nurse, I have a lot of stereotypical beliefs. I started off with many stereotypical beliefs about finance directors and finance professionals. So my first act of humility is to tell you, I started off thinking that you guys would be the toughest nut to crack with reverse mentoring. You would be the most skeptical, that you would also be the most resistant, okay? And that's because, and again, you remember that one of the things we want to be able to talk about in this hour or so, we want to be open, okay? Because I assume that most finance professionals and board members that I came across would be white middle-class men. And I got this stereotypical belief that they maybe wouldn't get the agenda, and because it involved a lot of emotional work and labor. Because again, remember, you guys are all finance professionals, and according to my stereotypical beliefs, you don't care about people and emotion. You're all about the numbers, right? So those were my stereotypical beliefs, some of them unconscious. But I have to tell you, the finance directors have been the revelation, okay? And so one of the first videos that came out of the project is this one. One second. And I didn't ask them to do this at all. But one of the first videos to come out of the project was this one.
I've been delighted to be involved in this programme. I've learned a lot, and I will encourage every person to be involved, because importantly, you can't effect change if you don't get involved.
From my point of view, I've enjoyed working with Oban. It's been a great experience having him as mentor, and I would encourage all my colleagues to join the programme and to work together with others in the organisation to keep it as good as it is, and an organisation we can be proud of, celebrating our diversity and our new formed relationships.
Brilliant. I couldn't have put it better myself.
And also, so one CFO there, and another CFO. I don't know if anybody was at the HFMA event last week and saw this trio speaking about their reverse mentoring experience. And on the right is Claire Wright, who is the CFO at Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, also Deputy Chief Executive. And again, absolutely has taken on the mantle of reverse mentoring. So it's done what it's intended, which is she has gained insight, but she took along, it's meant to also raise the profile of BME staff, took along her mentor, her reverse mentor, and the Chief Executive's reverse mentor to speak at a national conference, the HFMA conference. This is a band 3 care support worker. What other opportunity would she have to speak at a national conference? Certainly not to finance directives, okay? So, I mean, for me, I'm delighted to be here, not just because I've been talking a lot about reverse mentoring with NHS professionals, but I'm particularly delighted to be here with you. You are also, Future Focus Finance Programme is the first systematic, whole systems group that has asked me to speak to them about reverse mentoring. So I've spoken, to be fair, I've spoken to chairs and chief executives of NHS employers, but HR executives haven't asked me to come and speak to them as a group. Future Focus Finance has. So it goes back to my whole thing about what is possible and the power of deconstructing our stereotypes, okay? Is there any reverse mentoring experience in the room? Has anybody in the room done reverse mentoring, come across it in the commercial sector or in another sense? Is anybody doing it informally?
So I'm not part of it, but I know our trust is starting to introduce it. So
oh, fantastic.
We're talking a lot about it. So
yeah.
I don't know if people understand.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And may I ask what trust you're from?
Handbooks.
Yeah, so you came with that, so you were going to be on my list, you're on one of my slides later. Yeah, absolutely. So, because they're using the ReMEDI framework, I really hope that by the time we start peering up and we've had the training, they will understand reverse mentoring. And again, I'll talk to you about some of the organisations that are involved in a second. So, if you are in an organisation that's doing it but you didn't know, or an organisation that's about to start, again, go back and ask people. Tell me more. What's going on? Yeah.
Can I ask you, what's your definition of reverse mentoring?
Okay, coming to that in a second. Perfect, right? So, in whatever way we understand, before we define reverse mentoring, I just wanted to kind of hear from people if anybody's had any experience of it. So we've got one person who's trusted, but nobody who's been involved in it. Okay.
I've done a session at a BME conference event.
Yes.
Probably about an hour where
Yeah.
one person would give his experiences and
Yeah.
argue my experiences, but not had like a extensive like months.
Yeah.
Well, Claire Wright's one of our, he's our director.
All right, so you're from Derbyshire then?
That's right.
Aha, very good. Okay, so one of the trusts that really helped me develop the framework. Yeah, okay. Wonderful. So, so today what I'm going to do is talk about the project, talk about the framework we developed and tell you why, define reverse mentoring, and also talk about where we are now, but hopefully then get some discussion going about how might it work where you are, but also to hear actually what are some of your reservations, right? What are some of your concerns? Because that helps me to improve the framework, okay? Why is the ReMEDI project needed? I don't need to rehearse the kinds of things you probably already talked about in the first half of the morning, and probably the reason that you're here at us a day like this, okay? Not just the issue of BME and other staff of other protected characteristics, their experience of the NHS, their progress and success. Not just the business case for inclusion, but also the moral case, which is it's the right thing to do, people actually experiencing, feeling marginalised in the NHS. And mainly what I want to focus on is the fact that current methods, whatever we're doing now, the combination of things that we're doing now, they're not working. We're not seeing a massive shift in the dial, okay? So what I'm proposing is reverse mentoring alongside other interventions. So of course you're going to carry on looking at your res data. You're going to carry on doing traditional mentoring. You're going to carry on going on the Stepping Up, Breaking Through program. You're going to carry on going on leadership development programs for disabled staff and so on. But what I'm proposing is for you to think about reverse mentoring alongside, adding it to the toolkit. Okay? So why reverse mentoring? I actually was running some workshops with BME staff in the Midlands and East, and we kind of asked them, well, what are some of the issues? What would you want out of a BME staff network that was regional? And they said two things that made me think about reverse mentoring, which I'd come across in a different context. They said we are an asset and an opportunity. I was talking to nurses at that workshop. Nurses of today, influencers of tomorrow. They said we are unrecognized potential. You're wasting our talent, they said. And I'd come across reverse mentoring in another context and wondered whether it could be used to address some of these concerns. So what is reverse mentoring? So if there could be a conventional definition of a conventional idea, this would be it. This is where a worker in a senior position is mentored by somebody in a more junior position than themselves. Okay? So normally, traditional mentoring is where somebody in a senior position who is assumed to have more expertise, more knowledge, more experience, because we associate seniority with higher expertise, mentors somebody in a more junior position. Okay? Here we're reversing that relationship and saying somebody in a more junior position is reverse mentoring somebody in a more senior position, because we are saying that the person in the more junior position has more expertise in the experience of being from a marginalized group. Okay? Now, so reverse mentoring first was used, or I first came across it, it was first used formally with that title in General Electric back in the 80s, and it was junior executives, new graduates, reverse mentoring more senior executives. And it was specifically around using the internet in the early days of the internet. Some of you in the room look so young, you probably don't remember the early days of the internet, okay? So it was very much intergenerational, reverse mentoring, and it was around innovation, technology use, nothing emotional, nothing controversial. It might have been stressful back then, but nothing necessarily controversial, okay? But I started seeing some references to it in the literature being used more broadly beyond intergenerational, beyond age and differences in age. So there was a couple of references to it with female executives, reverse mentoring male executives in the commercial sector. And I saw one reference to it in the early days with the UK Cabinet Office having BME staff reverse mentoring more senior staff who were white. So what was beginning to emerge was some idea that it could contribute beyond just intergenerational mentoring to inclusion work, okay? But of course, I'm an academic, and I thought, okay, well, what's the playbook for this? How do we do it? How do we pair people up? How long should the relationships last? What things do we have to be careful of? Do we need to have some principles of pairing up to protect people? And when I then did some further literature reviewing and searching, I found there was actually very little to help me with that. Particularly where I wanted to expand the definition to include any group where there is marginalization, any group where there is a difference in power, any group where there is a perceived difference in power, or where the group perceives themselves to have less power. Okay? And we can see, therefore, that there's benefit or potential benefit for it to not just be applied to people from protected characteristics, BME staff, disabled staff, and so on, but other members of staff who have exceptionalities and are not protected by law. Okay? So in one of the training sessions, we had somebody who was, she was a woman, she was there not as a woman, even though that is a protected characteristic, gender. She's saying, I'm here because I'm the carer of a child with autism, and I don't think that my bosses understand how that affects my career. Okay? We had another member, another person being trained as a mentor, and he was a white male, and he said, I'm here because I'm a working class white man from Liverpool, and I'm working in a knowledge-driven London organization, I shall not name the trust. He says, when I open my mouth with this accent, I can see people switch off, think I'm stupid, I believe my career is at risk. Okay? So again, you remember regional accents, working class status, not protected by law. Okay? So any group that is underrepresented in the leadership of an organization, any group that's feeling marginalized, there might be some benefit for them to benefit. So again, start thinking in your organization, who are the people on the margins? Could reverse mentoring work with them and for them? Okay? Again, I couldn't find any evidence of how to do it. So because I'm an academic, I thought, well, I'll make up a way to do it then that is evidence-informed, theory-informed, and then see how it would work, okay? Now, why have I used a framework? Why not just pair people up and hope for the best? Why not just have a common sense approach, okay? And what we're trying to do is facilitate different conversations about not just race, but racism. Not just the experience of people of different genders, but actually their marginalization in the NHS. The experience of disabled staff and the problems they encounter, right? So not just lovely conversations about culture, but actually difficult, uncomfortable conversations about discrimination, okay? So I developed a framework because we want to actively reverse and disrupt the deficit model. Many times when we have groups underperforming, when we have groups that we don't see in the leadership, we say, okay, well, there is a deficit in them. So let's send them on the Stepping Up, Breaking Through, Ready Now, Kicking Down, whatever program, or some of the other leadership development programs you've seen for women, the Aurora program, right? You know all the programs, right? The assumption there, tacitly or explicitly, is there's something wrong with that group that needs to be fixed. Okay, there are problems to be solved. And what reverse mentoring asks us to consider is that the deficit is actually not only in the group that wants to develop. Yes, so carry on going on development programs, leadership development programs, learn how to, do finance better and all of that. But is it that the deficit is in the organization and its cultural competence? And generally, we're a knowledge-driven sector. When there's a knowledge deficit or a deficit in competence, we send people on a course, like we're doing with the minority groups. Or we give them a mentor. So we thought, well, actually, right. So could it be that the leaders in the organizations need some development? So let's give them a reverse mentor, somebody who knows what it is like to experience that organization through the lens of being disabled or having a long-term condition, being Asian, being gay, or whatever, okay? So we're disrupting and reversing that traditional deficit model. We're disrupting the traditional power hierarchies because those are perpetuating disadvantage. So the normal power hierarchy suggests that, apart from in forums and breakfast with the boss and all of those initiatives, workers are not able to talk to the chief executive and the board in a long-term relationship where they can talk about intimate things and problems. So a lot of those initiatives are about transparency and openness, but they're actually transient conversations, okay? We want to facilitate different conversations, less superficial and more uncomfortable. So we're putting people in longer term relationships. We're putting people together that would not normally be together in a longer term relationship, okay? That band 3 worker with the chief executive, for example, okay? And we are, through those individual paired relationships, trying to eventually, in a collective basis, address systemic disadvantage. So there are other people working on the system and then having the effect trickle down. We are starting with individuals and hoping that that collective effect will then produce system change, okay? We're also addressing this issue that many of our leaders are saying, we get it. Every one of your organizations that went on your website would have a really strong mission statement, a really strong value statement, probably, yeah? But what I'm hearing from leaders is we don't actually know how to go beyond shared values to what to do, okay? So what we'll hopefully do with reverse mentoring is repositioning anti-discriminatory practice as skill that we teach and that people can practice in this relationship, okay? And it also, importantly, repositions the disadvantaged group, your BME band 3, your female disabled member of staff, as expert by experience, which we have done very successfully with patients in the NHS, which we've seen a massive shift in power and balance between patients and the people that they're accessing care for. So we developed the framework using an actual research process, so I guess I want to give you confidence when we start talking about the framework and how you might use it. I just want you to have confidence. I didn't just make it up in my head, okay? I made it up in my head using theory, the theory of Paulo Freire, but then I went out to the community. I then went out into the organization and said, what do you think of the framework? What needs to change? How should we study the effect? How long should the relationships last? How do you feel about being paired up in your chain of command? Those kinds of basic questions to create the playbook, okay? And I'm telling you about that process so that you have confidence in the framework, okay? So this is the framework we developed, and then I'll talk to you about the model. So this is the ReMEDI framework. And the ReMEDI framework is simply a really fancy name for saying this is how we guide organizations through decisions that it must make before it puts people in a room in a pair group, okay? So what do I need? One of the first things I do is engage the leaders, and I engage the people who are possibly going to be mentors, okay? And I'm doing this because, of course, I'm still socializing to talking about this power hierarchy, the leaders up there and the workers down there, okay? But even that we want to challenge, okay? So the organizational commitment element of the framework says the leaders have to commit. They have to commit time, resources. So mentors, so junior staff are not doing training, for example, in their own time, as is often the case with diversity work, BME staff networks, LGBTQ staff networks. That's your own time. That's marginalized. That's not mission critical. Do it on your day off, okay? So the organization has to commit time and resources, and also I demand symbolic commitment from the leaders. So not just throw money at it, say the right words, but I need the board to commit to being reverse mentor. I want them to be visibly saying, I will go first, okay? And in most of the organizations, we've actually achieved that. The notion of creating organizational safe space. How do I make a person with a disability, how do I make a trans woman feel safe to challenge their boss's boss? Okay? How do we create an organizational safe space for them to do that? And of course, more recently, we've added sustainability, which is how do we allow organizations to be able to do this again and again and again and again without having to have me come in to train mentors and prepare mentees. The next element of the framework here is peer-led support. So again, you remember I used the theory work of Paulo Freire. He suggested that people in the oppressed group have to be able to support each other. Okay? So what we have is monthly peer support sessions where people can bring problems as they're mentoring their bosses and the leaders so that they can share experiences with people who are going through the same experience. The key thing, of course, is the mentor training and the mentee preparation. The mentors have 1 day of training. The mentees have about an hour and a half of preparation. We're using disruptive language here, right? So the mentees, the leaders are only prepared an hour and a half. The mentors have more knowledge, they have a whole day. Because I want the mentees to feel off balance. I want them to have to depend on the mentor, the more junior person, to understand what the heck is going on. What are we doing now? How is this supposed to work? We want to create that imbalance in power to actually make it a disruptive mentor-mentee relationship, okay? And then at the heart of the framework are the models that we use when the pair is in a one-to-one and a relationship, okay? Originally there was one model, which is the RACE model, which is this here. 4 domains, and the domains, not phases, so you don't have to work through them in that order. And they are resistance, action, compassion, and power, and in each of those domains, there's specific activities, specific things that you would be critiquing as you move through the 6 months of a relationship. So for example, in the resistance domain, the mentor, the reverse mentor, the BME person, the person with disability, the person from Liverpool, is encouraged to commit acts of resistance. This is where the thunder comes, okay? This is where they challenge. This is where they say, I've brought to you a policy document that I believe reflects how uninclusive we are. I want to talk about the composition of the board by gender. I want to talk about my experience of, okay? So this is where they commit acts of resistance. The action domain allows us to think that, look, it's not just, we don't want to just have the leaders gain insight, shared values. We want them to do something. Now, it's not about fixing the individual mentor's problem, but it's about saying, what does this mean for the organization? And what do I need to do about it in my role? And then how do I influence my leader peers to make a collective response, okay? So it's not about fixing the problem of the individual mentor. So the action domain, remember the focus here is on the action for the leader, who is the one who's meant to be developing, right? So when I say to the pair, if the actions are for the mentor, then the relationship is reverting to the normal mentor-mentee relationship. Okay, you need to check that active resistance. Okay, the compassion domain is where you're going to start becoming uncomfortable. And then I thought it was you guys, the finance professionals, who'd be most uncomfortable. Okay, in the compassion domain, what we're asking is the opposite of what we usually ask of leaders. We usually say to leaders, be dispassionate, because we believe that breeds objectivity. Step back from emotion. You're usually rewarded for being a good de-escalator, a person who can stay calm under pressure. We're asking the peers to bring emotion into their conversations. We've used Ubuntu methodology, which is from Southern Africa. It's the notion of being human, the act of being human. If I am human and I show you my humanity to you, we come to common understanding. You show me your humanity, the things that affect you negatively, when you felt humiliated, how you felt when they said X. Okay? So we're asking people to bring emotion into the work in the one-to-one relationship. Okay? And actually this Ubuntu methodology is particularly powerful. It's actually written to the South African Constitution. So it actually was the basis of the Truth and Reconciliation Committees. This is where truth will reside. This is where, you know, we say so casually, speak truth to power. But actually, we're not giving people a space that's safe for them to speak truth to power. They're just talking to power. But in terms of, we're almost also creating a safe space for the leaders to say, I'm going to tell you something I did that I'm now wondering whether it was disableist or racist. So there has to be some kind of protection, truth and reconciliation, or truth so that there can be reconciliation. Because actually if they can't tell you those things and you give them their take, your take, as a person from a disadvantaged group, then actually they can't test out why that was the wrong response. Okay? So that compassion domain is where we're actually using emotion and humanity. The idea, of course, is that Paulo Freire argues that it is emotion, not just data, that motivates people to act, particularly where they have to give up power to improve the lot of the person that they're listening to. Because actually it's easy to say, yeah, I'll do that if it's not going to affect me and my power. Right? Data will help you with that. But actually it's emotional connection, common ground, that will make somebody say, gosh, if I improve the situation for BME staff, it means that people like me, white male, for example, white female, for example, middle class white male, for example, I might actually, my chances of getting the jobs might be reduced. And it's actually emotional connection that allows people to be brave enough to redistribute power. Okay? The idea is that that emotional connection promotes in the leaders the ability to commit acts of solidarity. So the mentor is committing acts of resistance here. The mentee begins to commit acts of solidarity. So it is not just the BME member of staff that's speaking out. It's not just the disabled member of staff, the gay member of staff that's speaking out, but actually people who do not come from those minority groups. Okay? This is where it allows people to progress from being an ally. Here, shared values. They tell you after the meeting, I agreed with you. That doesn't help you because the meeting's done. They go on to advocacy where they're publicly supporting and speaking out. Okay? So it's allyship, shared values, plus knowledge, plus public speaking out. Okay? And then finally, this process empowers staff, mentors, because it means that they are in a relationship with a leader and perhaps have a chance to tell them things that they would not normally have a chance to tell them. And Freire argues that it's the person who has a chance to change ideological beliefs of the powerful that has power. So we're empowering the more disadvantaged staff. But also they're doubly empowered because these guys, the leaders, are committing acts of solidarity. So now they're not actually, they're empowered because somebody else is also fighting the fight, not just a disadvantaged group. Okay? So we started off just looking at BME staff. But actually very soon when we started working with the first organization, they said, but this could work with other disadvantaged groups. So we've now developed these three models that govern the one-to-one relationship. The race one is ethnicity. The grace one, generic RACE, is all protected characteristics. And the grace plus model is the one where their exceptionalities are not protected by law. So the example I gave of the Liverpudlian gap. And so individual organizations decide what are our priorities, what are our biggest needs. We want to focus on BME staff. No, we want to go to all the protected characteristics, or we want to go even wider. Okay? So that's the thing. What it allows us to do is the leaders to see different things. So walk in the world of the BME member of staff, walk in the world of the junior trans man. But it also allows the leader to see things differently. The disadvantaged member of staff, the mentor, walks in the world of the powerful person and says, let me tell you how I see your world. So we have things like reverse shadowing, where I might follow somebody to a board meeting and I say, let me tell you what I didn't hear, let me tell you who I didn't see in that board meeting. It raises the profile of disadvantaged staff, and it's about asset recognition, recognizing those people as assets. We use these 3 tools: critical purpose conversations, observations, that's reverse shadowing, and storytelling. We've got a structured storytelling tool. And this is what that day of training allows people to practice, but also this is when they have the peer support sessions. We remind them as they go through the 6 months, try this. So you're not going to be sitting in a room for 6 months just talking one-to-one. You could be out and about, observing, following somebody around, them following you around, having storytelling or conversations. Okay? So hopefully that means that then we're not finding it boring. Okay? So some of the things that, so we have just begun the evaluation, but before we started the evaluation, people were talking about their experiences in social media. So this is the chief executive's mentor, the band 3 worker. So again, see, it's this notion of stepping out of the comfort zone into the world of the leader, reverse shadowing. Let me tell you how I saw that. Not let me learn from you, but let you learn from me about what is familiar to you, making the familiar strange. This is the chief executive saying, right, it's not just about talking, it's her coming to me. Okay, so this is her at the board meeting. We're trying to not just get people to see over the fence, but actually remove the barrier completely. Let's understand what makes up the barrier from the position of the person who does not have privilege, so that we can deconstruct the barrier. This is who is doing it at the moment. The ones at the top, phase 1, are the ones that helped me develop the framework. So they were the experimenters. So remember, we're doing the research with them. So they weren't the guinea pigs, they were the pioneers. Okay? And your trust is in there as well. So you need to sign up because we're about to start second cohort. Okay? It's interesting, isn't it, that 2 of the 5 are mental health trusts, like partnership trusts. And they were my earliest adopters. And I don't know why, anybody from mental health? Yeah, interesting. You guys are just fabulous. Yeah, obviously. No offense to you. And again, we begin to roll out a bit more formally, broadly now that we've got some lessons to some of these trusts. And this is where your trust is just about to start. Anybody else see? So we've got some, again, provider, but look, 1 commission support unit. And then thinking about the future already. How do we make it sustainable? How do we scale it up? How do we generate evidence about effect? Not that it is effective, but if it is. And with what? Do we need a separate model for finance professionals? Or will Grace, Race, and Grace Plus work for finance professionals? Do we have to have a specific model for you? Okay? So how do we generate research and evidence about it? Again, the finance director talking about her experience as she was going along, okay? All very organic and generating. I think it's those kinds of things that then Future Focus Financing then saw, that said, well, actually, what we should be doing this as a group. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is the rollout so far always at board level, or are you going to levels below board as well?
So again, this is part of the decision making in that organizational commitment thing, and this is why we talk to the board, but then we also talk to people on the ground. And it's varied. So for example, in Nottingham University Hospitals Trust, it's only the nursing leadership. So a couple of that leadership is on the board of the overarching trust, but some of them aren't. They're at the associate director level and so on. And one of the questions we ask the mentors is, how do you want the second cohort to look? So a lot of them say, look, the board ain't the problem, love, right? They get it. And also they don't have the difficulty of implementing shared values at organizational, operational level. So a lot of them have been really keen very early after the first trial cohort to say, let's go deeper into the organization. We want the band 8s being reverse mentored because it's my manager that's my problem, not my board member. Yeah. So this is a decision that the organization makes because the framework is a framework, not a prescription. Yeah. So it has varied. Yeah. But where there is no board involvement, I demand board involvement. Because, yeah, we do want it to go to the managers, but actually if the board is not putting their hand up, then I'm worried about actual commitment.
Is that the whole board or just some?
At least some of the board, yeah. In some places it's been the whole board. In other places it's at least a couple of members, and also I'm getting more and more NEDs now interested. So you as an organization would make those decisions, and the people on the front line who would be the mentors are the ones that would be demanding that through me, because I don't work for them. I mean, I might be commissioned by them, but I don't work for them. So I can go and say, what does it tell me that I don't see X signing up? Yeah.
Would you ever have a situation where someone is being mentored and mentoring someone else, so they're being mentored?
Yeah. So we had in one of the trusts, somebody, she was white, a white woman, so she was being reverse mentored by a BME person. I can't remember what their ethnicity was. But she also was a stammerer with mental health issues. And so she was reverse mentoring a leader around disability, at the same time. And some of the mentees were saying, can I have more than one mentor at one time? And also I was at the Wellcome Trust recently, and they have diverse mentoring, but they do it in groups. So it'd be 3 LGBTQ members reverse mentoring 1 board member, right? So it might be that I think that's a really resource-hungry way of doing it. And also because, for me, the ReMEDI approach is exhausting, because I need it to be emotional. I need to be thinking about your childhood, your past, where your beliefs about disability came from. I'm not convinced that in a 6 months period, your attention should be split with more than one mentor or mentee, So I think, again, you want to talk about that and make those decisions when you're sending out the call, making allocations, doing the training. Because I think a lot of people assume, it's just going to be like mentoring. I'm not going to go home and cry or think about it when I'm washing the dishes, but actually it is quite exhausting. Yeah? And in fact, I was doing a presentation and I had 3 chief executives on a panel, and one of them, who was doing the ReMEDI framework and had come at 6 months, she said that in their board, they should simply all underestimated the emotional labor of the work. So again, think about how many people you would be mentoring or being mentored by. This is Future Focus Finance, doing a case study. I'm telling you, you guys are the business, right? Because I would have thought it would be HR professionals, okay? But again, thank you as finance professionals for being brave enough to engage in the work. So again, you will probably are interested in how will we generate the evidence. We are evaluating, but we're beginning to see interest on a system level, which is you guys, NHS employers, and then I've got now one arm's length body on board. That's early stages, so I haven't named them. Okay? This is the problem as a researcher, and I suspect maybe some of the questions that you will have, which is, so what? How will we know? What are the outcomes? Okay. Now, our evaluation strategy is using this. It comes from the Kirkpatrick training model, but applied to diversity interventions. And all we can do at this stage, because even though across the country we've up to about 170 peers across how many other organizations that was, 11 or so, those are still relatively small numbers, especially when you start breaking down by type of trust, type of organization, type of professionals, okay? So what we're really only able to do in the evaluation at this stage is evaluate people's reaction to the model. Does the model work? The learning, what insights are people, leaders, and mentors getting through the 6 months? What are they therefore doing about it? Application and implementation, what are they doing about it? Or at least what are they declaring that they're doing about it? What are their intentions to act? Okay? In the longer term, what we want to do is develop some frameworks, some tools to be able to measure impact on the business. Okay, so for example, one really odd, intended but possibly predictable business impact is the same chief executive who was saying about the emotional toll. The freedom to speak up thing. Is it, what would you call it, raising a concern? It's not complaint. She said that following the 6-month period, the rate of concerns raised from about the BME issues from staff in that trust tripled. Right? How do we measure business impact? You might panic if you're a board, but she says as a board, they chose to believe that was a good thing, because what they believed was that not just the mentors, but the mentors that were the people that they were telling, saying, look, the board seems to be open, felt safe to disclose the problems they were having because of ethnicity and race. And she was saying, well, if in 3 years' time it's still climbing, then we have a problem. Okay? But actually, how do we measure impact? And then, of course, the broader things, the stuff, the intermediate outcomes on staff promotion and success of BME staff disabled staff and so on. But of course then the big kicker, which is what effects are having on patients, BME patients, complaints and so on. Okay? And so we're talking all the time and thinking about how we might do some measurement to demonstrate impact at that level. What is the return on investment on diversity investment and the social return? So how much is, I'm talking about organizational commitment, sometimes that's just notional commitment, but sometimes that's cash. And how is that returning on, I don't know, length of stay, turnover of staff? And what I'm finding as I'm going around NHS organizations is that people are not seeming, apart from the clinical interventions, all the LNOD interventions, people don't seem to be that bothered about generating evidence. And this is something I'm trying to change, particularly in regards to reverse mentoring. And then the massive biggie, people are, oh, what are we going to do with culture change? So how do we begin to measure culture change? Okay. So this is now my question to you. So we'll take some questions, but also have some discussion about, so what does this mean for you? Could reverse mentoring work where you are? What do you think generally? Could it work? How might it work? So it could just be, we might be doing it. So you've got finance directors there. At the moment, all organizations are working within their organizations. Even, you saw on there, I'm doing a sort of combined project between Health and Social Care and Leicestershire, but they're still only reverse mentoring within their organization, even though they've commissioned the work together. Okay? How might it work where you are? But also, how else might it work? A lot of you in service provider organizations. Yeah. So questions here at Nottingham University Hospital Trust, they're saying, could children and young people reverse mentor senior nursing leaders in the children's services around how they experience services? So not just workers, but actually service users. And again, broader question, this was around in Derbyshire, and I think it was a mental health person. This is rather sort of awkwardly put, but service users. Could we have service users more broadly involved? Okay. So this is my question to you. Could your organization benefit from reverse mentoring? How could you use reverse mentoring in your role? Okay. And maybe we should just pause here first and actually ask if there's any questions, and then we'll open up for discussion. Any questions about the framework or how the work was developed, or what exactly am I talking about? Is your question about what is reverse mentoring answered?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. And you're saying we're about to start at Cambridge, but I'm not sure people understand it. Do you understand it a little bit better?
I understand it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think you've also answered the other question I had in my head, which is how do the actions part, which is probably still at the whole program is still at the early stages.
Yeah. And also, so one of the things, it's action research. I'll come to you in a second. So action research is that the work emerges as we learn more, because really nothing is known about reverse mentoring. And if anybody tells you they're an expert, then they're lying, because there's no research, there's no literature. We're generating that as we go. So one of the things that a mentor in the training said to me, he was a clinical psychologist, he said, you're going to give peer support to the mentors. What about the leaders? I'm like, they're powerful. They don't need support. Right? Stereotypes. He's like, no, they do. This is where the compassion comes in, of the BME member of staff. No, they will need support, because you're asking them to deconstruct their beliefs about being a good person, actually. Yeah. And so what we have now is halfway through, I facilitate a reflective practice session. We ask them, what have you done? What has been your experience? What have you learned? What are you going to do? What have you done? And we begin to get them to think about collectively, what does that mean for you and your leadership peers? And at the end, the focus is very much practically, what are you going to do as a leadership? What is the collective organizational learning and action? Because you remember, these mentors are now going out and talking, and the organization will then be looking on to see, well, what happened as a result? Yeah. So we've actually now added in that reflective practice, organizational learning thing. Yeah. You have a question there?
So I'm chair of the Inclusion Network at work, and our HR partners actually came to me a couple of weeks ago saying, would you be interested in having a reverse mentoring system in place of work? It's a lot of financial mention in 2 weeks' time. But I was also thinking whether there's any scope for us doing it cross-organisation. Yeah. So I work for CCG, and I'm wondering whether there might be some interesting dynamics and some good learning to have if we paired up with our partner trusts.
And this is the thing. So in the Leicestershire and Rutland thing, they have commissioned across. So there's the Leicester City Council, Leicester County Council, UHL, which is the big acute trust, Leicester Partnership Trust, and third like a voluntary sector organization doing health and social care, and they've really been open. So we've done joint training and all of that, but the practicalities of pairing up across organizations at the moment ended up being a little bit difficult, right? I think that moving forward, we could probably do it across organizations. The practical issues were, in one organization, if 20 people come forward and say, I want to be a mentor, but only 5 people come forward and say, I want to be a mentee, if we're then allocating to other organizations, and then within that organization you haven't got enough matching, then it becomes a bit difficult. I think some of the organizations are still a bit nervous about the idea of airing dirty laundry outside, right? So I think we have to build some more trust around confidentiality and what might be the benefits of working with somebody completely new to your organization, yeah? I would say that's kind of the next phase of the work. So at the moment, the phase is, so another question people often ask is, but aren't you already just working with the converted? So the chief executives that put their hand up are the ones already inclusive, right? So is it really going to benefit anybody, right? So next phase of the work is working across different organizations, also working in non-provider organizations like arm's length bodies, CCGs and so on, and the CCG is involved in the Leicester one actually as well. But also, the next question I have is, what about reverse mentoring as remedial action? So somebody who's had a complaint made against them for sexism or for racist banter or whatever, could we be prescribing reverse mentoring? So not the converted, right? So yeah, I think all of those things, cross-organizational reverse mentoring, and you remember a lot of normal mentoring schemes work like that. So in most of the regional leadership academies, there's a mentoring register. You just sign up. It doesn't matter what organization you're from. Okay, so maybe that we move away from the cohort, add-on, not just the cohort approach we have now, which is there's a cohort of mentors and mentees within the same organization, and we pair them up and start them off at the same time. It may be the next phase is that there are registers of reverse mentors, and you from Leicestershire can then sign up to somebody from Derbyshire and be there. Yeah, maybe. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Yeah. Any other questions before we then start thinking about how it might work for you? Oh yeah, sorry.
I had a thought. I mean, I'd be nervous if reverse mentoring became a punishment.
Yeah, okay, right.
If somebody said, oh, well, you're not playing the game, so people do it.
Yeah.
But the bit I was really interested in is the pairing up, because I think that's quite critical.
Okay, yes.
Do you deliberately try and find opposites? So is it male and female, etc.?
As you can imagine, super easy if you've got a board of 8 and 8 mentors, yeah? So you then try and maximize difference. So one of the things we don't know, for example, and again, further research is, if I pair up, how does intersectionality work? So if you're reverse mentoring me, because that's the other thing that came up, is that I started off thinking it was going to be BME nurses reverse mentoring white leaders. They were like, hello, there's more complexity than that. It ended up being every professional. And they were saying, but what happened, there's a lot of misunderstanding between different cultures, right? Hence the BME Afro-Caribbean woman reverse mentoring, the chief executive who's white, mixed race, white and Asian, for example, right? So you can reverse mentor me because we might have, or I could reverse mentor you rather, I'm sure I'm more junior than you. That could be because we have a different ethnic background, right? And so sometimes we're trying to maximize difference where there's small numbers, large numbers, where we know quite a lot about people. It's easier when it's only BME staff or only gay staff or only, because we know it's just like maximizing the difference between that, around that one characteristic, okay? It then becomes so much more complex when we started, for example, in that trust that had 40 peers and they were doing Grace Plus. So it could be all kinds of exceptionalities. So we had to use a combination. So always the pairing up happens between me, external, and an internal person who understands what the chain of command looks like. So in flat structures like Derbyshire, it's more maybe things about sight. Whereas in really complex, big organizations, it is band and all these other exceptionalities. Yeah, so other characteristics that are about chain of command, yeah? So, and somebody internal who then knows about personal things like, oh, I wouldn't pair that person up because, okay? So we use some principles like nobody in the same chain of command, but we always have an insider and an outsider. And then the last kind of checkpoint, if you will, which has two purposes. Is there anything that we don't know about? But also, again, disrupting the normal power hierarchy. So we do not give the leaders any right of veto. but we send out an email to all the mentors individually to say, this is the person we'd like to pair you up with. Do you know any reason why good reason why this parent should not go ahead? So it might be that we didn't know that they're getting married to the person's son, or they have previous beef or something, right? And we have had a couple of cases where they're like, oh, actually, no, that person has been my mentor in the past. It wasn't a formal relationship, I'd rather not, okay? So with the pairing up, that's kind of what we do. We try and maximize difference. So what I've found is that more and more, as we've learned more about more and more about the pairing process, the form that people fill in, we ask them to give more information. So before it was just, give me your name and willingness to do it. Now we're saying, tell me why. We ask for some of the characteristics and assure them that it's only for the basis of pairing up that we're asking them what gender they are or what gender they self-identify as, their ethnic background, and so on. Yeah. So we try to maximize difference. We really don't know whether, and this might be a future study, do we try to pair up only women with women and see therefore what the effective ethnicity is? Do we try and always make sure we just record the characteristics? We tend to, in the training when we're doing Grace Plus or Grace, ask people, what aspects of your biography are you going to bring to the relationship? So somebody might say, I want to talk about being, so actually I had a case, because we're now trying it in higher education, the university sector, and we had a student who said, so students are going to be reverse mentoring professors, right? They said, I want to talk about being an Egyptian immigrant, but I don't want to talk about being Muslim. Now I have to say, right, so then one of the things is that in the first meeting, you want to declare what things are off limits. And I remember thinking, but what I'm really thinking is that 6 months into the relationship and trust building, there's no way you're going to not talk about the visible evidence that you're a Muslim. You're going to talk about it. Because, how do you disentangle the story you're telling as being an immigrant woman versus being an immigrant woman wearing a hijab? Okay? So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
So I have one question. So I know you're at the fact-finding stage, we're doing lots of research and trying to get as much as possible so you can pull some conclusions. But do you have any early ideas of what you think those conclusions will be, or what do you think you should be doing moving forward? I mean, it's an unfair question, kind of.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So we have got some insights because remember that what we have is the data from the reflective practice sessions where we're saying, what are some problems you've encountered? What have been some of the most valuable experiences? How do you think it should look going forward, right? And so some of the impressions are people are saying it's having an effect on them. Leaders are saying, okay? So like that guy at the start who said it's the most important piece of work I've done. We're beginning to understand that, so none of the organizations that have gone through the whole 6 months have said they're not doing it again. So they're saying, we want to do a second cohort. Some have said, so some organizations are ready because they've had issues. Some organizations are ready because they're progressive. And some of them have said, therefore, we want to carry on focusing on BME staff. We don't think we've cracked it yet, we need more numbers. And some are saying, actually, we want to broaden it out and go deeper into the organization. But in all cases, it's been driven both by, that last reflective practice session is, the mentors on their own, and then they're coming up with a collective message they want to take to the leadership. An hour and a half of kind of lunch or cake where all of them talk together, socially, leaders and junior staff. And then there's a presentation from the mentors saying, this is what we want to happen, and this is how we think reverse mentoring should happen into the future. And then the mentors go, and I do another effective practice session with the boards or the leaders to say, okay, what's going to happen next? How are you going to demonstrate to the organization that you've learned? Yeah. So some of the messages have been coming out from them, which is that people, this is where the thing about sustainability came from. People were saying, yeah, we want to keep doing it. And I was like, with the current financial climate, I didn't feel comfortable always being commissioned to go in. So I was like, okay, let's now think about training the trainers. Yeah. Some of the messages are, who would train? So one of the questions was, would people buy it from somebody who didn't have a protected characteristic? So if I'm doing a day's training, I'm an immigrant, I'm a woman, I'm short, I'm from a black and marginal background, I'm a nurse, so some people are coming forward because there's a profession, the idea of professional marginalization. So an occupational therapist said, I've never met an occupational therapist who's a chief executive. I want to educate a board member about that. Yeah. I actually can't remember why I was telling you that now. I can't remember why I was telling you that. But yeah, some of the insights are, let's do it again, but let's broaden or deepen. Yeah. yeah, and that there's some benefit, but it's hard work emotionally, and that also there might be unintended consequences that some trusts might panic about, yeah. For me, remember that I'm suggesting you use some kind of structure. It doesn't have to be the ReMEDI framework. But some trusts are doing it without a framework or a structure. So again, if you're interested, talk to North East London Foundation Trust. Anybody working from North East London? So they've been doing reverse mentoring for a couple of years, about the same length of time as I've been doing it. But they don't have a framework. They're definitely not using the ReMEDI framework. But it's successful. They are the only trust in the country that's all green, for example, on the RES data. Okay, Sheffield. I'm working with Sheffield Teaching Hospitals Foundation Trust, but Sheffield Community Trust have been doing it for a couple of years. They've done the exact opposite to me. They did it a couple of times and generated rules, whereas I've generated rules and then I'm doing it. Right. So again, talk to people at Sheffield Community Trust because I don't think it's that you have to use the ReMEDI framework. Okay. So those are some of the messages coming through about the benefits of having a framework. Any other questions or thoughts? We've got like 30 seconds, so I'm pretty sure.
What would you say are the don'ts of the ReMEDI program?
Yeah. Don't take it lightly. Even though I've just said, talk to people who are not using a framework. You probably find they're using some kind of rules, yeah? But don't just pair people up and hope for the best. Because remember, this is potentially dangerous work if done properly. So if you just want to have lovely conversations about culture, lovely, 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 and actually that was one of my concerns in the early days when people were tweeting about, oh, so lovely to be meeting with my mentor. I'm like, so I started saying to people, at the end of every meeting, ask your leader, or in fact, you both rate on a scale of 0 to 10, how uncomfortable did we get? And if you're hovering at 1, 2, 3, you ain't doing reverse mentoring right. Reverse mentoring for inclusion, okay? So I would say that one of the don'ts is, if you really want it to be a game-changing conversation, I do think you need rules and a framework, which is how do you prepare a junior person to consistently challenge? So when I ask, in the preparation, when I ask the leaders, how do you normally respond to being challenged? Are you ready to be challenged? What do you think they say? Oh yeah, I'm a chief executive. Oh, like, about race, about racism, not just data, but your own beliefs. And actually to be coming at a leader for 6 months, when most of these mentors are nice people, they've experienced this marginalization, but they're nice people who want to get on in their career. They don't want to be victimized. And it's hard work to say, let me tell you my trauma. Right? Let me tell you the trauma and help you develop an understanding of why that's important for the organization. And I'm a bit nervous if we're just throwing people together and saying, off you go, with no kind of preparation on either side. And also no reflection along the way about, okay, what does it mean for you as a peer, you as an individual, but also the collective leadership. So I would say the don'ts are, don't do it randomly in a light-hearted way. Challenge if you're seeing it being used in your organization in a tokenistic way, as in we're doing it because everybody else is doing it, it's sexy at the moment, then challenge. I would say that's a don't. Yeah. Wonderful. So I don't want to keep you from lunch anymore. I'm here over lunch, and then I'm repeating the session. So during lunch, you can always grab me. And do think about these 2 questions. And I'm going to send, I think the slides will come out, so I'll put it where you are. Okay? Right? Thank you very much.